Hey guys, welcome back to another video here on Toned In Entertainment, where we're talking all things pop culture. Today, it's time to continue with our comic book discussion of the WCW comic book from 1992. Now, this is issue number 11 of 12. So yes, guys, we're almost here. And this issue is called Halloween Havoc, and we're finally gonna find out who the Ghoul is. Now this is a pretty cool two-page spread of the Stinger taking on some of WCW's finest back in the locker room. Again, this issue is called Halloween Havoc. That was one of WCW's signature pay-per-views, but this comic issue really focuses around the shocking conclusion of the Black Stinger saga. Issue 11 starts off with a very frantic Paulie dangerously thinking how he should have never done any deals with the Ghoul. That with the Ghoul being able to manipulate Sting and turn him heel has caused WCW's locker room to turn on the Stinger, and that ticket sales have gone down the drain. And he knows it's only a matter of time before the Ghoul sets his eyes on him. Just as Paulie says he's had enough, the Ghoul pops out of the shadows. Paulie dials up his signature brick phone and calls for help from the Dangerous Alliance. But the Ghoul tells him that wasn't a smart move because anyone could trace his cell signal. As the Stinger tries to hold his own, here he says, "Guys, let me explain. It's not as bad as you think. That it's actually worse." Ron Simmons replies, "Don't listen to him, guys. He's just a scummy traitor." As the Stinger fights off his fellow WCW wrestlers, he tries to tell him that first he got amnesia and then he was brainwashed by the Ghoul. Rick Steiner replies to this, "Sure, Stinger, I used to use that one all the time." With the Stinger sending his oppositions flying, he tells them that they are still friends and that he's fought countless battles to protect them. And even though things might be bad right now, the only way to get through this is to hammer it out. The wrestlers agree on hammering things out as they pile on top of the Stinger. With several wrestlers standing over the Stinger, each have questions for him. Flying Brian asks, "You say nothing's wrong with you, then what's with the hair?" Arn Anderson says, "I never even liked you in the first place. Why should I believe you now?" Ron Simmons goes on to say, "Even if you were under the Ghoul's control, you still did those terrible things like stomping on little Bobby Sanders' birthday cake." Nikita Koloff finishes it up, letting the Stinger know, "Bookings are canceling on us. You've ruined us." Sting tells him he realizes this, but it's not too late to act. Sting then goes on to say wrestling's not just a career, it's a way of life, and all the limos, jet planes, t-shirts, action figures, and Marvel comics are just the icing on the cake. And of course, nobody's gonna let the Stinger live down, destroying poor little Bobby's birthday cake, even though he was under the spell of the Ghoul, with somebody saying, maybe that's a bad choice of words. The troops of WCW have decided to rally around the Stinger when he asks, "Does anybody smell gas?" When all of a sudden there's an explosion and several of WCW superstars are trapped by flames in the locker room. Rick Steiner suspects that this is something the Ghoul would do. Down the hallway, Max is peeking out the door where he admits to the dastardly deed, but he's not getting any credit for it. Sting sees that WCW faces and heels are coming together for one common cause, and that's to stop the Ghoul. As Sting shuts the door, he finally gets to see the look he's been sporting recently, and he says to himself in the mirror, "Hey, what's with my hair?" Ravishing Rick Rude says, "Only your stylist knows for sure." Sting then asks Rude why he hasn't been doing anything to put out the fire or help stop the Ghoul, that he doesn't have the guts to stand up to him and try to save WCW. Again, Sting will never live down that birthday cake incident, as Rude replies, "Pretty judgmental for a guy who stomps on a little kid's birthday cake." Rude goes on to say he doesn't need the locker room to take on that giant walking avocado, that Sting can join him in the fight if he's not afraid. Rick Rude and Sting decide to join forces, and as they take off, Sting tells Rude that he is afraid, and if he were smart, he'd be scared too. The Ghoul took his mind and twisted it inside out, and he's going to pay. Rude says that he's also got a score to settle for the Ghoul kidnapping Paulie. Sting replies maybe if they fork over some cash, they'll keep him. Rude reminds the Stinger that they're not friends, and once they take care of their common enemy, things will go back to normal. Now the Ghoul is massively drawn here. We've got Paulie dangerously just hanging around, and we've got the unlikely duel of Rick Rude and Sting coming for the rescue. The Ghoul says to Sting and Rude, "So glad you can make it. Paulie and I were just hanging around." Meanwhile, back in the locker room, the blaze continues to grow. Rick Steiner says the exit's blocked. We'll all end up getting barbecued. Max begins to make his exit as he doesn't want to miss what the Ghoul has in plans for Sting. Finally, the water sprinklers come on. Ron Simmons sees Max and gets down into a three-point stance and says he's seen that guy hanging around the Ghoul and it's pretty obvious he's created this chaos. As Ron Simmons makes the tackle, Max exclaims, "My neck!" Ron Simmons replies, "Good, that's one extremity broken, only 4 to go." With the fire now out and Max being indisposed by the All-American, Ron Simmons gathers the troops to tie up Max until the police show up. Now we go back to Rick Rude and Sting, who have teamed up to rescue Paul Lee dangerously. Sting tells Rude to get on his shoulders. Paul Lee asks Rude, "What you doing with him?" Rude replies, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." And with Paul Lee being rescued, it's finally time for the Stinger and the Ghoul to go head to head. Sting tells the Ghoul, finally, after all this time, "It's just you and me." The Ghoul replies, "And soon it'll just be me." The Ghoul then goes on to say, "The mind control, the brainwashing, this costume, they aren't all what I'm about. They're just riddles wrapped in enigma, layers of an onion peeling away. And after all this time, you still don't know who I am? I thought you would have caught on by now." After he sends Sting and Rude flying, the Ghoul goes on to say, "Think about it. It was years ago. I was happy, successful, until you came along and took everything I had away from me. You stole my career, and that's why I'm destroying yours." As the Ghoul slams Sting's head into a locker room, Rude tries to come to the rescue. Rick Rude goes into his signature saying, "What I'd like to have right now is for you to get that scaly, green, flabby body over here so I can kick it across the room." The Ghoul says, "Isn't that sweet? They're teammates." Even as muscular as Rick Rude was, he can't compare to the physique of the Ghoul. As Rude struggles to match power with the Masked Man, the Ghoul tells Rude that he could have been in on the glory, that he has to hate Sting just as much as him, and to team up with him is stupid. As the Ghoul begins to press Rude down, he says, "What a matter, big boy? Don't like having tendons ripped from the bone?" Rude tells him that he can beat the Ghoul anytime he wants. He's just saving his strength for his big date with Medusa that night. While distracted, Sting hits the Ghoul with a splash, and even Paul Lee begins to cheer him on. He says to the Stinger, "Get him, Sting! Stomp him! Smash him! Now, now, now!" Sting tells him, "No comments from the peanut gallery." Sting calls over for Rick Rude's assistance. Rude asks him, "What's the plan?" Sting says, "Pain. Long, hard, intense, bone-crushing, insufferable pain." As Sting and Rick Rude send the Ghoul flying, Sting says, "Let's fold up this creep like a wet newspaper." After the hard hit, the Ghoul tells them, "Looks like you've drawn first blood. Kudos to you." The Ghoul then sends a row of lockers falling on top of Rude and Sting. Rude says, "My legs are pinned and I can't break free. I never thought it would end like this." Sting tells him if they combine their efforts, they can remove this debris. And he knows Rude is not a quitter and they can move these lockers if they just work together. The Ghoul, towering over Rick Rude and Sting, says, "A pep talk? How inspirational." The Ghoul then goes on a rant that Sting has used his knowledge and his skills of his friends to get ahead. The Ghoul then says to Sting, "Have you any idea what it feels like watching a man called your friend grab all the gold and glory after being left to rot in a hospital bed?" And just as it appears the Ghoul is going to finish off Rick Rude and Sting for good, he gets a shovel to the back of the head, and we see that Cactus Jack has saved the day. Jack says this was his payback for all the stress he has caused him, and that you just don't have to worry about a 300-pound crazy man inside the ring, but outside of the ring as well. Bang bang. With the Ghoul all tied up, Sting tells Paulie and the boys, "Thank you for your help. Together, they have saved WCW. I don't suppose we could be friends after all this." Paulie exclaims, "Forget it, Stinger, that things will go back to the way they were." The Ghoul still tries one more attempt to get in Sting's head by saying, "I could have told you they'd bail out on you. If you want revenge, we could." Sting cuts him off and says, "Shut up. All I want from you is answers, and let's start off with, who are you?" The Ghoul tells him to think back to his training days. We then see a flashback of Sting training with an older man, probably in his late 50s or 60s. The Ghoul tells Sting to think about it. "I was by your side day and night, training you to become the great champion you are today. I was already an established pro. You came to me to teach you the ropes. I saw your potential and was glad to help. Sting says, no way. My trainer was Crusher Craig Tedders, and he was middle-aged back then. The Ghoul then goes on to say, I see you're still selling the Crusher short. I was there for your very first match and raised your hand in victory. But then just days later, I blocked out both my knees while teaching you the Scorpion Deathlock. You said that it was an accident, that you were sorry. And from that day, the Crusher was never able to wrestle again, and that Sting went on with his career, and he never bothered giving him a lousy phone call. Sting grasps the Ghoul around his neck and tells him there's no way he's the Crusher. The Crusher would have wished him the best of luck and that he's worked hard for everything he's accomplished. He's just jealous. Now in another flashback, we see a younger, beefier guy, and the Ghoul says, you don't even want to know what mystic forces I dealt with to rejuvenate myself and become young again. And Crusher Craig was reborn. And what most of us probably expected, that Max was behind this. The Ghoul reveals that Max was very familiar with the spirit realm, and he gave him his awesome power and phenomenal strength. But in the process of dealing with these spirits, it transformed him into the Ghoul, and the mask is just a reflection of that fact. Sting, not believing a word from the Ghoul, goes on to remove his mask, and all of a sudden, the lights go off. And when the Stinger is able to turn the lights back on, he's left in an empty room with a pile of ropes. Sting then goes back to the locker room where Ron Simmons, the Z-Man, and the Steiner brothers are, but all Sting has from the Ghoul is a pile of ropes. Sting says to Ron, you don't suppose the Ghoul could have been the Crusher? Ron replies, Ghoul was probably just playing with your head. The Z-Man says he remembers watching the Crusher on TV. He'd be ancient by now. Sting says whether it was the Crusher or not, they came out on top because they all worked together. Johnny B. Bad says he doesn't expect the Ghoul to be coming around anymore now that he knows how WCW gets down. Arn Anderson even says to Johnny B. Bad, heck, I feel so good right now that I'm even sorry I sent you to Alaska. Sting now has the world title around his waist. Alright, now I feel whole again, more powerful than ever. With all my Stingers behind me again and the belt around my waist, there's nothing I can't accomplish. The WCW champion is the greatest prize in all of professional sports, and I swear that I'll never let anyone or anything degrade it ever again. Oh, Stinger, I really wish that was true, but you know, here in 2019, we could have never known what was going to happen back in 1992 when this comic is released. But hey, let's not do any gloom and doom. Let's let the Stinger live with this victory. Stinger then goes on to say, so all you rudes, cactuses, and especially the Ghouls had better watch out, because I am Sting. I am the WCW champion. Now on the bottom of this page, we have the WCW locker room rallying around their world champion Sting. So, you know, it's all good, it's all roses, right? Well, on the very next page, it looks like Sting is going to have one final challenger in issue 12, as we see Big Van Vader is not done with the Stinger yet. Vader has been pumping iron and he's ready to make his return as he has the great Harley Race in his corner. Harley says to Vader, we will strike now while Sting is weak. I'll walk you to greatness. Remember why I've taken you through the school of pain. You fear no man, you feel no pain. You are Big Van Vader. Now, I believe at the end of my issue 10 comic book discussion of the WCW comic book, I said it was action-packed, but you know what? Issue number 11 took it to a whole nother level, and there wasn't even a wrestling match in this issue. It was just non-stop. We got the conclusion of the Black Stinger saga, and we finally found out who's been tormenting Sting this entire comic book series, that it was his trainer who did some like mythological spears to rejuvenate himself and become the Ghoul. Now guys, there's only one more issue left, and that's issue number 12, and we've got Big Van Vader on the cover, and he's coming for Sting. And I have not read this issue yet, so I'm going to be doing it with you guys. So guys, make sure you subscribe here to Tone In Entertainment for that future video, and I'm really excited. I mean, we're going back to 1992 and reliving this awesome comic book series, and we know, guys, WCW is no longer around, and we're not going to get any more comic books, so this is going to be the final one. So guys, make sure you subscribe here to Toned In Entertainment for that future video. You don't want to miss out on that one.
Subscribe to the channel. Do it. Go now. Do it now.